Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Allison Williams, the current president of the Queen's University Alumni Association. It's my pleasure to welcome you all here today and to offer an acknowledgement of the land that binds us together. Queen's University is situated on traditional Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee territory. The history of this traditional territory predates the establishment of the earliest European colonies. As this is a virtual event, I acknowledge many of us will be joining from traditional Indigenous lands from across Canada and from other states around the world, which are home to many diverse Indigenous peoples. In preparing for today, I spent some time reflecting on the ways in which Queen's alumni, as individuals and as a community, have engaged with truth and reconciliation over the past decade, as well as my hopes for our continued commitment and engagement with this pressing and urgent project. There is still so much work to be done, so much systemic change needed on university campuses, in our schools, the justice system, child protection systems, the list goes on and on. While it is daunting, there are many things we can endeavor to do as individuals and as a community. As someone who has participated in the Mile in Their Shoes project, I would encourage my fellow alumni to participate in this and other learning opportunities when they arise. I would also encourage our alumni to donate time and money to causes that promote and advance equity for Indigenous peoples. And perhaps most importantly, in the spaces where we each have our own unique power and influence, I urge each of us to exercise these in a manner which seeks to acknowledge and mitigate the legacies of colonialism while empowering and supporting Indigenous peoples and their sovereignty. I am sure our speakers will have many important thoughts to offer us, especially on other actions that we can take, and I now have the pleasure of introducing one of them. Teho Wisquant, Elder Alan Doxtator, is here to open our time together.
Yako diliwatan je tu hadi dati ya dong haki kwat niko. Sego uskachia he tu ahweno ni kwat niko. To ye tino wala do negli suha ji sego. Yunatili watan je tu hadi dati ya dong haki kwat niko. Sego uskachia he tu ahweno ni kwat niko la. To ye tino wala do asane te gung. Excuse me. Asana te gung. Dano tele chi sego. Agwego, Unatili watan je dung hadi dati dung haki kwatnika. Sego skajia he dwakwen ni kwatnika. Datwas no wela dung kani handesa ang hi de chi sego. Yutili watan je dung hadi dati dung haki kwatnika. Sego skajia he dwakwen ni kwatnika. Ta ye chino wala dung anung kwat kun chi sego. Yutili watan je dung hadi dati dung haki yung kwatnika. Sego skajia he dwakwen ni kwatnika. Te twa no we la do a yung kwat yo we chi sego yung kwat stu hadi dati yo do haki kwat nako sego is kati he do we no ni yung kwat nako te ye tino wala do na de kalon take chi sego yo te liwatan je do hadi dati yo do haki kwat nako sego us kan us kachi a e do we no ni yung kwat nako te ye tino wala do ka kuntili so ha chi sego yung kwat ka tung hadi dati yo do haki kwat nako sego is kati he do we no ni yung kwat nako te ye tino wala do aneka na sagun chi sego yung kwat stu hadi dati yo do haki kwat nako sego is kati he do we no ni yung kwat nako te ye tino wala do aji tu ha so ha chi sego yung kwat ka tung hadi dati yo do haki kwat nako sego is kati he do we no ni yung kwat nako te ye tino wala do abuela suha ji sego no natili watan je tu hadi dati ya do haki kwat niko sego uska ji he do we no ni kwat niko ta ye tino wala do la diska yon te sa ji sego no natili watan je tu hadi dati ya do haki kwat niko sego uska ji he do we no ni kwat niko แต่เหตุว่าในเวลาดูสมควรจื้อหาแน่นวันเตเกค่ะเวนี้ตะเลยจิเซก็เราจะเรียกว่าตันเจดูหดีตัดที่ดูหักกว่านี่ก็เสก็สกจีเหตุว่าเวโนนี่กว่านี่ก็แต่เยที่โนลาดูยุกิสัทธว่าสมเตเกค่ะเวนี้ตะเลยจิเซก็อย่าก็ที่รู้ว่าตันเจดูหดีตัดที่ดูหักกว่านี่ก็เสก็สกจีเหตุว่าเวโนนี่กว่านี่ก็แต่เยที่โนลาดูยุกิกว่าลงจิเซก็อยู่นัตเลวัตันเจดูหดีตัดที่ดูหักกว่านี่ก็เสก็สกจีเหตุว่าเวโนนี่กว่านี่ก็แต่เยที่โนลาดูก็เยนี่ฮันงเวตะเกจิเซก็อยู่กินี่นี่ก็ลาตัดที่ตัดที่ดูหักกว่านี่ก็เสก็สกจีเหตุว่าเวโนนี่กว่านี่ก็แต่เหตุว่าในเวลาดูเสก็ดิสจีอังลูวักเกก็ลวนาดูเนี่ยตัดที่ดูหักกว่านี่ก็แต่สเลเกกันจกว่าในทุนยเลวักเวนี่เน้นเดกันเฮลาดุสลากัดสันตักว่าตักตรงเน้นวันตักตรงนักเกเน้นสควอตเลจีเน้นทุนยเลวักเวนี่เน้นอันลงว่าเกวันเดทหดีเน้นกันละกงอากาศที่ตัดที่ดูหักเน้นองกว่านักตาเนท
Yawen, Elder Allen, thank you so much. And I just want to say that when Alan greets us in his language, he's sharing something deeply personal. He's sharing sacred words and sacred teachings. And I want to say on behalf of all of us, Alan Nyawen, you're grounding us today in your language, in your territory, and you've been so generous. So thank you for starting us off in a good way, asking us to come at this with good minds and good hearts, and we're very grateful. I'd also like to say thank you to Allison Williams for her very strong and direct and eloquent message. Again, thank you. Thank you to Allison. Tanshe, Sheila Rogers, Dishi Nikashun. And in my broken Michif, which I'm just learning as a Métis woman, I extend greetings to you all. I said my name is Sheila Rogers, and I have the honor of being the 16th Chancellor of Queen's University. And somehow Chancellor Lightning has struck me twice. I was the Chancellor at the University of Victoria for 7 years. And I'm also a recovering broadcast journalist. I was at CBC Radio for 43 years. And in 2011, I was inducted as an honorary witness to the work of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And this really was a life-changing honor for me. It was a privilege, and I believe it is a duty that I accepted for the rest of my life. I'm also a member of the Métis Nation of Greater Victoria. So that's enough about me. I really am excited about this event. There are hundreds of you tuning in, and thank you on behalf of the organizers and on behalf of the university. As universities, we're still seeking to respond and fulfill the TRC's calls to action, especially those which deal with post-secondary institutions. And we're entering into projects and plans for equity through decolonization, indigenization, and reconciliation. Ultimately, we want to create the conditions for the greatest possible success for every student. So we're talking equity. In all of this, I think we have to be mindful not to blaze past the truth part of truth and reconciliation. And there's a wonderful quote by George Bernard Shaw, who said, "The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has already taken place." So what does the truth part mean? What is Canada's truth? I have other questions that I ask myself as Chancellor, and they include, are we listening to what the community is asking for, or telling the community what they need? Are we prepared to step aside and be accountable for our mistakes and missteps? Are we prepared to listen and to keep on listening? And I believe the answers to all of those questions have to be yes. 3 years or 3 years ago, it actually wasn't 3 years ago, it was 10 years ago itself, 2015, the very first Indigenous Innovation Summit took place here in Winnipeg. And there was an evening that was dedicated to reconciliation as innovation. And to quote the chair of the TRC and our beloved Chancellor Emeritus, Murray Sinclair Iban, and Iban means ancestor or honored departed one. Very briefly, he said, reconciliation as innovation is how we put things together, back together in a new way. So as you know, this year marks the 10th anniversary of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's final report and its 94 calls to action. 10 years ago last week, the 94 calls to action were released. I was in the Delta Hotel along with one of our guests, Rai Moran, witnessing Murray Sinclair Iban reading all of those calls to action. And then in December, the 6th volume, it's about that big, really, not a fish story, was released at which hotel? It was the Westin, I think, the Shaw Center. And those volumes, all of them are very worth reading. They're all incredibly well written. But do, I urge you, read the summary report of the TRC. It's a call itself for truth, for justice, for healing, and the building of right and respectful relationships that will lead to lasting reconciliation. Today's event gives us the opportunity to reflect on what progress has been made and the work that remains to be accomplished, to acknowledge the gaps. Some are chasms, to be perfectly honest. And we have the opportunity, very significantly, to listen to Indigenous voices and experiences that will guide us on that path forward. Truth, healing, and reconciliation at Queen's is a journey. Reconciliation isn't a date, it's a relationship, and it requires acknowledging, listening, learning. I think very importantly, and this was pointed out to me by an Indigenous student at UVic, it means unlearning as well. And it means meaningful action. And then doing it again, lather, rinse, repeat. I know the participants in this conversation will inspire us as individuals and as the Queen community as a whole to listen with our hearts, to engage with our minds, use the critical thinking that we learned at meetings, and act on the scaffolding of truth to build reconciliation. Queen's is committed to this journey through a lot of efforts, such as our gateway through which all new projects have to pass, and that is indigenization, equity, diversity, inclusion, anti-racism, and accessibility, or IEDIAA for short. So it's not that much shorter, let's be honest. We were fast out of the gate, Queen's was, responding to the calls to action with the 2016 Queen's TRC Task Force report called Extending the Rafters. And the response to that report, a check-in to see how we were doing in 2022. Again, both make excellent reading and both provide guidance for us here at Queen's as to how we will extend the rafters. Ganashuni Jan Hill, the mother, grandmother, clan mother of the Turtle Clan Mohawk Nation at Diandanaga, and former Associate Vice President of Everything Indigenous at Queen's, taught me in our first ever conversation a Haudenosaunee teaching, a principle of extending the rafters. When newcomers arrive or when community expands, you extend the rafters of the house to make room for them, to make them comfortable. And with an expanded longhouse, the community will thrive. I also want to acknowledge the creation and continuing great work of the Office of Indigenous Initiatives, OII for short, which has been inspired by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call to action. And then, of course, there's A Mile in Their Shoes, which invites alumni and community members to figuratively and literally walk alongside each other, to listen and to understand Indigenous perspectives, Indigenous voices, and values. This is a journey rooted in storytelling, place-based learning, and respectful engagement. A Mile in Their Shoes was designed to deepen understanding of the legacy of residential schools through very beautifully curated readings, virtual discussions, and in person at the Soul of the Mother Indigenous Healing Lodge. Over the years, A Mile in Their Shoes has had a profound effect on its participants, shifting mindsets, shattering stereotypes, building empathy, and inspiring action. Today, we're going to hear with a number of program designers, as well as the past participants. We will share how the program shaped her understanding of reconciliation and how we move forward. I'm honored now to introduce the fabulous speakers who will be sharing their insights with us today. I won't go into their full bios, though they are very impressive and well worth reading. Their bios are available through links in the chat if you'd like to learn more about our panelists. So briefly, our panelists are Dr. Dan Brandt, Queen's alumnus, Matthews Fellow in Global Public Policy at Queen's, a facilitator of A Mile in Their Shoes, and a longtime leader in Indigenous governance and economic development. Dan, welcome. Ry Moran, the first ever Associate University Librarian for Reconciliation at the University of Victoria. He was also the founding director of the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation and the co-founder of A Mile in Their Shoes. Welcome, Ry. Welcome to you both now that I see you. And Moira Hudson, Queen's alumna, Arts 68. So in 3 years, it's a big year at homecoming, Moira. It's going to be amazing. And a 2024 graduate of A Mile in Their Shoes. Thrilled to have the three of you with us. Very, very grateful for you to be here to share your experiences and reflection on what truth and reconciliation means 10 years since the TRC report and when the calls to action were released, and also reflections on A Mile in Their Shoes. So I'm going to begin with you, Dan. I hope that's all right with you. I bet it was beforehand, so I think we're okay to go. You earned your Master of Public Administration from Queen's. You are now an adjunct professor at Queen's. And we're very fortunate because you bring decades of leadership experience with the Tyendinaga Mohawk community and other Indigenous organizations. And as a key facilitator of A Mile in Their Shoes, you've been central to advancing education and awareness about Indigenous peoples. So I want to ask you, as you look back over the last 10 years, how do you assess the response to the TRC's calls to action, especially the ones that regard post-secondary education? But if you want to take it broader than that, please do. Dan?
Thank you. Seko Sewagoyako Orinia has young guts. Just as a thank you, Sheila, for that introduction. Yes, I'm a member of the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte at Tyendinaga, a Turtle Clan, and I've been living and working here for basically all my life. I worked in Ottawa for a number of years in a number of different organizations, and also a little stint with the federal government. But I think every First Nations person does that. Have to kind of test the waters. With respect to your question, and first of all, I must I'll come back to it, but I must say at the beginning, the kudos to the Mile in Their Shoes program, because it really provides a good mechanism for people to witness and feel some of the issues that have come out. With respect to the question about the last 10 years, you know, I think if we put the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in context, for people who are not aware, within the First Nations community, particularly in Indigenous in the Indigenous areas, since 1989, there have been 11 commissions, 2 of them being royal commissions. and they all have started to address the number of issues that are prominent and evident within the First Nations community. There have been others as well, like Parliamentary Special Committee that was referred to as the Penner Report. And that was done in the mid 1980s, which I think spurred the Royal Commission on Indigenous issues, and that was published, I believe, in 1989, or shortly after. I'm not exactly sure of the date. But in addition to that, there are numerous other evaluations of federal programs that take place on a regular basis. There are the Auditor General's reports on numbers of issues that come out. So the the TRC was basically formed to address the legacy of the residential schools and put colonization and the impacts of colonization into focus. And I think the mechanism that was used by that commission to um, hear from residential school survivors directly was an incredible feat that was undertaken by the commissioner and the commissioners that Willie and uh, the other commissioner that was on that as well. Um, the in again in context in this is and I guess what I'm getting at is that this is not new. The TRC was not new. However, it was undertaken and it provided a tremendous amount of background and specific information that cannot be refuted. I think the commissioner, Mr. Murray Sinclair, was uh, was genius in the way he presented the information that came out because it was not challenging. It was not. It just spoke the truth, and but that is but that is one of the real and the way that they put the calls to action, highlighting and being very specific, was excellent in terms of getting that information out. Because of that, because of the background, because of the numbers of commissions and reports and recommendations that have been made over the years, certainly there is some skepticism within the First Nations community as to what is happening there and how it can be addressed. The the TRC gives a roadmap on exactly how to address it. Institutions like Queen's undertaking this program, Mile in Their Shoes, and the reports that they've undertaken are to be commended for that. The University of Victoria is another leader, university-wise, that has undertaken a number of programs and also developing some programs that have been very instrumental in having people with the background to go out and provide accurate information. And I think one of the things, and I'm not sure whether it was the Commissioner Sinclair or who said it, was the answer is in education. He said education was supposed to happen with the residential schools, but that was not the purpose, and that is told very strongly and shown in the reports that the TRC did, and as Chancellor, as you've said, the reports that have been made by the TRC document that in detail. And those are all, as we say, they are all truths to be heard. Different universities from, and I have not seen or spoken to them specifically about what they are doing, similar to what Queens and UVic have done. But there are different approaches that are being done by different universities, whether it's programming or how they are undertaking addressing this academic challenge. And and I think what it is necessary to understand is that um, in order for people to receive education in a meaningful way, they have to be receptive. And this is one of the things that I've seen in the Mile in Their Shoes area, is that everyone who participates in that is very receptive to learning. And what is outlined and shown in that is that it is not particularly a confrontational program, more than education and trying to outline and show what is what has been the consequence of the residential schools. I'm always surprised when I hear people who live in the area, either the GTA, the Greater Toronto Area, or around Brantford, who did not know that the first residential school in Canada was at Brantford. And and they have, and it always shocks me that this is an unknown. And that is simply a function of education, of making sure that that information is there. And that information is provided, I think, becomes a responsibility of the institutions. And not only talking about it, but providing some context about what happened and how it happened, and um, and what the road to decolonize, or I'm not sure anyone can decolonize specifically, but understanding,
Dan?
one
Yeah.
of
I'm sorry,
falling back on.
I'm going to have to ask you to just come to a conclusion, as
Sure.
the sands of time are running through the hourglass. But thank you, Dan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, just falling back on some of the philosophies of my ancestors, the Haudenosaunee people, um, principle that they founded or worked on was basically peace, friendship, and respect.
Mhm.
And those principles, I think, uh, have to fall into everything that is being done, and with that, building that relationship. So I'm trying to summarize a whole class into these few minutes. So thank you for that, and maybe we'll come back in the question period. Thank you.
Definitely, Dan.
All right.
Thank you, Nyawa, to you, and thank you for giving us the context out of which the TRC came, and we will get back to some of your points, I'm certain, in the Q&A. So many thanks. Kichi Marci. And I'm going to go over to Rye now, a bit of an introduction. Rye is Canada's first, and I'm actually betting the world's first, Associate University Librarian for Reconciliation at the University of Victoria. And Rye, when I was chancellating, if you will, at the University of Victoria, I had the honor of witnessing in your role integrating and instigating supports for Indigenous knowledge across campus, interdisciplinary, and building meaningful relationships to support the learning of truth and reconciliation. And the course content for A Mile in Their Shoes was carefully curated by you in collaboration with Ganeshune Jan Hill, who was at the time the Associate Vice Principal of Indigenous Initiatives and Reconciliation at Queen's. So you're also the founding director of the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation, not too far from me here in Winnipeg, and led initiatives like the National Student Memorial Register. So this is just to say that your work has been foundational for the country. And looking back over this past decade, since all the reports dropped, how do you evaluate the response? How do you assess it, especially pertaining to post-secondary education?
Yeah, thanks very much, Sheila, and thanks very much to you all for being here. Just very briefly, I'm just speaking from the territories of the Lekwungen peoples right now, actually Lekwungen and WSÁNEĆ peoples. How do we evaluate the progress or the journey that we've all collectively been walking upon? You know, I can say I personally joined the TRC officially in about 2010, very early 2010, late 2009, but I started the conversation with the commission in about 2008. That's going back a long time now, actually. You know, really when it comes right down to it, we talk about 10 years since the calls to action, but you know, we're the better part of 20 years out since the really foundational steps, the agreements in principle, and the early mandates for the TRC were being discussed. So we stand back and we think, you know, where are we in regards to fulfilling the hopes, dreams, aspirations that those people around the table had at the time? I think we can say that the level of awareness around residential schools has increased dramatically in this country, thanks to the courage of survivors and their families who stood up and spoke with so much bravery in front of the commission. And it's so important that we remember the strength, the courage, and at times the toll that took on survivors as well. Because, you know, having been there, I was the director of statement gathering for the TRC. I mean, those truths are not easy truths. They were shared through a great deal of tears, oftentimes fear, trepidation. People were afraid about telling others what happened to them. And that is a treasure that has to be cherished for this country. We have been given the gift of truth, and we cannot forget that when we think about the 94 calls to action. Well, we need to understand those through what we've been told around what never, ever, ever to let happen anywhere in the world ever again, especially in regards to the treatment of children. So when I think about where we are today, well, what I can say at the outset of the TRC is that there was concern. You know, we were concerned about, will this conversation be continuing afterwards? What are the things that we would need to do? And this is obviously specifically the work of the commissioners, but what are the things that we would need to do to ensure that it didn't fall flat like so many other commissions and inquiries have fallen victim to? How would we need to speak to Canadians? How would we need to speak to the hearts of Canadians in order to ensure that they not just understood this intellectually, but they felt the profound and pressing need for change and the profound and pressing human rights failures that we've had in this country? And, you know, I heard a saying a little while ago, and I think the saying is, you can have a thought without a feeling, but you can't have a feeling without a thought. And I think what that says is how important, again, the courage, strength, and determination of survivors were in creating those big feelings for Canadians. And you were there, Sheila. I mean, you know what those national events were like. That fortitude really carried through in the voices of the commissioners and really provides us collectively with a foundation of truth that we are now sort of walking that mile within. Now, Just in terms of where we are, I am very, very thankful that the conversation is even still happening. We can't take that for granted. And I mean, right now, my little attendee counter says we have about 220 people in this dialogue. I, Seriously, thank you to every single one of you for showing up. Because we are 10 years out, and it matters that you're here, and it matters that we're talking about this still, and it matters that you're opting into this conversation because you all had somewhere else to be. Lives are busy, and it takes time to have this conversation, and we have to keep having this conversation if it's going to be successful. As far as the calls to action go, I mean, we could talk a lot about that, but I just want to, sort of compare and contrast a couple of different calls to action. So there are some big ticket ones that I know people like Maurice Clary-Bon felt very, very strongly about. A call for a new royal proclamation, for example, that would repudiate concepts used to justify European sovereignty, adopt and implement the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, renew or establish treaty relationships. We can think about the absence of that and the conflicts that are playing out right now in the pages of the paper around, say, Bill 5 in Ontario, where we're seeing some of these old patterns about sort of unilateral government action, or at least steps in that towards that playing out. So we have a lot of work to do there. And that Royal Proclamation was something that was called for by the Royal Commission in the aftermath of Oka. This idea that we need to reset the relationship and reset how we're going to live together. That's a big one. That's not an easy one to do, but one that is easy to do, and that we haven't done as a country, is erect a monument in each provincial capital. There is work on the national monument, but a monument, as the call to action says, to honor survivors and all the children who were lost to their families and communities. When we talk about the 94 calls to action, there's a whole bunch of action in there. And I wonder, like, why is that one not done? It's very, very, very much within our reach, So when we look at these, there are ones that are big and complicated and weighty. There are ones that are very, very achievable. And I think we have to remember that we all have agency within this.
Right. Thank you so much. And again, it breaks my heart to have to wrap you up or to wrap Dan up because I know that you have so much more to say. But I'm very anxious to get to Moira as well, because Moira, you actually walked in a walk and in a walk in their shoes. And I think that that's really essential. It's essential to hear from you. This was just last year. And I'm wondering how it's shaped your vision, your approach, your understanding of truth and reconciliation, and what changed because of that process. And I'm going to need you to unmute. That's the very first thing we need to have happen, your audio. Great. Oh, we just had you. Try again.
Oh, okay, good. Yes, there are different buttons. No, well, thank you very much for inviting me here. I'm delighted to be here, and I must say I'm honored that I had the opportunity to do the program. And I was aware historically of the issues, and I was aware of the report, and particularly through Queen's and the reports that Dan was talking about, expand the rafters. But getting into this program, I'd like to say first that it was very well structured, a guide to the participants through the context of the Truth and Reconciliation report. It's very difficult to read and absorb, and but you do have to understand the essence. And again, the way that the program was structured, that you could go into depth in areas that were of interest to you, And there were other areas that you had to summarize. So you weren't forced into areas that didn't resonate with you. But one of the important things was, I think, and back to Rye's earlier comment, that the heart was in the context of that program, that you got to understand through some of the readings and through some of the other articles, and also through experience at the Six Nations Reserve in Brantford, exactly what had happened and what had been like, and so you could form your own feelings on that. And so it was experiential as well as it was intellectual. So that, I think, for anyone who's worried about one side or the other, you can put into it exactly what you want, but you will get out of it a lot of learning and experience and understanding of a part of our history and a part of our future that we were all part of.
Moira, is there a moment, an experience that you had that really stays with you?
Yes, and the most important part for me was the experience at the Day of Reconciliation that we had at Six Nations territory. And basically, there was so much going on there, but the part that was most important to me was that the significant impact of recognizing that in spite of the past injustices on their survivors, these people could accept us into their homes, into their community. They talk to us about their culture and beliefs, and they shared a delicious meal with us, and that they had prepared. And so that was just a very positive, encouraging experience. And then when we were eating this lovely lunch, we were watching a video of the residential school that Dan commented on before. And the juxtaposition of that disturbing video and the positive experience that we had during the day resonated with me very much. The positive ambience of the day expressed hope for a better future in spite of the past. And that was my main takeaway, and a significant change. We have to look at the future. We have to be positive. And I think it was, again, what Rye said, we have to look at, no, I'm sorry, it was Dan's comment about the Haudenosaunee belief on peace, friendship, and respect. And that's what we experienced. And that, I think, is what we have to take and build on in the future.
Thank you, Moira, very much. And Rye, I think it might be over to you. You had a question.
Oh, I don't know if I had a question. I just did type something into the chat, though, responding to a person's question. And it just very briefly, the question was about ongoing work and learning materials. And I do just want to call out, the really important work of the Office of the Special Interlocutor, Kimberly Murray's reports that I did put into the chat there. The reason why I say that is for where we're at in terms of the conversation. Those reports really build directly right on top of some of the important TRC calls to action, as do the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls inquiry reports as well. Both of those efforts have been direct responses to specific calls to action of the TRC. So we are in motion as we go. And to what Dan was saying, there are more reports, and there's a lot of reports before the TRC too. So we're literally drowning in riches of Indigenous perspectives on what needs to change. The goal, the opportunity is, of course, to lean into these.
All right, I'm just going to pick up now with a question from Amanda Hubbard, and thank you to those who have entered questions into the Q&A. Moira, what do you feel, and other participants, but Moira, what are you feeling now differently as a result of the program? Do you feel the program is helping to resolve the issue?
I think the program, for the people who are fortunate to take it, can help to resolve the issue, but I think it's much bigger than any of us. And one thing that Murray Sinclair indicated, that it would take several generations before reconciliation really happens. But I think we each have a role in our own small way of doing what we can. We will never see the end state, but I think we have to move forward to a state where we do have equality, we do have equity, and we can support those people in this country who preserved it for many generations so that we could enjoy it.
Rai, do you want to comment on that? What were your hopes originally? And I'll ask Dan too about this program, and how are you feeling about it?
Well, some of my hopes, and I might just sort of flip this around a little bit and ask you a little question here too, Sheila, because we've talked a lot about hope through our conversations that we've shared with one another. Certainly, my hope for a program like this was that people would leave feeling different, and feeling like there was and is the possibility of a relationship that perhaps they didn't even know was possible in the first place. Because we've lived in such major gulfs, between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. But Sheila, this is also something you've thought about a lot, and I mean, you're an honorary witness for the TRC, and we've shared a lot of miles of road together. So what comes to mind for you as well? Because you're a very, very thoughtful person, and I mean, we've even talked about not just hope, but love and how that fits into the whole equation here.
I won't be too long on this, though I could be. But I do want to say, Rai, I will never forget you saying that the whole residential school era was, in fact, an attack on love. It was war on love. It was war on family love, sibling love, community love, and then nation love. And so I used to bring up a question in every discussion I had about truth and reconciliation, and that was, what has love got to do with it? And your response was exactly that it really is all about love. Murray Sinclair Iban said the same thing and was very pleased that one of the national events, they all dealt with the 7 grandfather teachings, but one of them was about love, and that was very important. But I do feel hopeful. I feel every time I look at the bestseller list on a Friday and I see the number of Indigenous writers who are on that list, that tells me that people are hungry for more information, more stories, more knowledge. And there's a new book out, 52 Ways to Reconcile by David Alexander Robertson, that came out of the gate at #1. And if you want a really great statistic, Bob Joseph's 21 Things You May Not Know About the Indian Act has been on the bestseller list for 5 years now. So that tells me Canadians are really hungry. They want to know more. It excites me to see Indigenous artists winning prizes. Jeremy Dutcher winning the Polaris Prize for music. This Saturday, the Governor General's Performing Arts Awards are going to be announced and celebrated. Jeremy will receive one. The actor Graham Greene, you might know from Dances with Wolves and other things. He's taken on more scary roles since then. Graham Greene will get one. Sandra Laurent, the great choreographer and deep arts thinker, will also be one. I think about watching people here in Winnipeg at the Human Rights Museum looking at Carrie Newman's amazing art installation, The Witness Blanket, being moved to tears. This is an installation, a piece of art made up of pieces from residential schools, objects from residential schools. So I know people want to know. I think we've got to create those pathways. And I think, Rye, when you're talking about monuments, very, very easy to do.
Mhm,
And things that would mean a lot in community because they're
mhm,
places where people can gather. I know I could go on, and I don't, because this we can talk afterwards. But I want to go back to some of the thank you for that, Rye. Thanks for
mhm.
inviting me in as a panelist. But I will go to David Baldock. And David, thanks for this question. What and when will the ideal future be like for the desired new Canada for all people? And Dan, maybe I'll start with you on that one.
Well, thank you, and that's an interesting question. Um, and one thing I just following up on the discussion that's just happened with respect. I think change, if we're talking about change, which is part of reconciliation, um, change doesn't happen out of despair; it happens out of hope. And and I think that's one of the things that we need to look at is not dwelling on despair, but also what is hope? What is the and this kind of a segue into the question. Um, there's an understanding. One of the things that needs to be recognized that there's a different worldview by Indigenous people, and that worldview needs to be respected. And it's perhaps and again going back to some of the knowledge that our forefathers were intelligent and wise enough to look at, is talking about the Goswenta or the two-row wampum, that there are two different ways of looking at things and they should not cross, and they can work together. And that is the future. I think if there was some level of respect for the structures and the philosophies and the ideologies with respect to Indigenous people, with the governance systems and whatever, that I think those are some of the principles, of some of those main things that need to be in place in order to move forward and work together in order to make Canada a better place.
I don't want to limit this discussion at all. Moira, I just wonder if you might have something to add based on your experience.
I see it as an evolutionary thing, and this country has become so diverse with so many different groups that this whole issue of racism needs to be discussed and looked at a very broad level. But I really think that what we're doing here, but starting at the individual and making them aware of what they can do and what the future can hold, that we can make a difference. So end state, I just don't know what it's going to look like. I don't think any of us will, because society is changing. Our cultural complexity is changing. But I think that we have a sensitivity in this country to trying to listen and make changes based on the consensus of the majority.
Rye, brief word from you. The
Um,
Canada.
I think Canada has so much potential in front of it. If we take the steps and choose the steps that will push us towards respectful relationships. And what and that idea of respectful relationships is what the commission defined as reconciliation, the establishment and maintenance of mutually respectful relationships. I mean, to me, that is a goal that should be extraordinarily easy to opt into. what a great goal. I mean, think about living in a society where we have respectful relationships between all peoples and with the land itself. I mean, that is a country that I want to live in. That is a Canada that I want to live in. That's a world that I want to live in. We don't live in that world right now. There's a lot of examples right now that we can see in the political discourse as it plays out in the conflicts between nation states, even in terms of how Indigenous human rights are viewed and respected, and frankly not respected in Canada. They give us very strong evidence that we have a lot of work to do to be more respectful. So let that be the path. Let that be the call to action that we wake up with on our minds each morning. What can I do today to be a more respectful person to others, to recognize that we all share this world together and that everybody has a right to be here and that there will be disagreements. But when we disagree, how do we stay true to the vision of a peaceful, respectful coexistence that serves, the fundamental human rights that every person, every peoples of the world enjoys or is meant to enjoy as the basis for that relationship? And I'm hopeful. I mean, despite the history that we have, and despite the very fragile state of affairs that exists in the world right now, because we have to have hope, and more than hope it's the determination to live through that hope and to fight hard for that hope to be manifest.
Thank you, Rai. And I see that we're at 12:59, 11:59 Central Time here in Winnipeg. And I think I'm going to have to start bringing it to a conclusion, but I want to say the questions are fascinating, and I do want to figure out some way to be able to address them. And I would like to say, we're going to try. We'll get back to you somehow. It won't be during this Zoom session because I realize people have made a commitment for 1 hour, but they're great questions. I would really, really like to get back to each and every one of you on them, and maybe we can talk a bit afterwards. Don't go away, and we'll figure out how we can do that among the panelists. But for now, I do want to say thank you to our panelists. This is very much like a live radio show where you don't necessarily know what's coming at you. And I think you answered so beautifully. You took all of the questions very much to heart and answered from a very, very deep place, beginning with you, Dan, and Rai, and Moira, describing your experience. Thank you so, so much. And thank you again to everybody who attended in the hundreds and the people who submitted questions. I wish we had time to answer them all. They're beautifully thoughtful. And as I said, I hope we can get back to you with some answers because they're important questions. There are a lot of resources available through Queen's University. I would ask you to check out the Office of Indigenous Initiatives. They do amazing work. Our elder, who we are about to hear from as we leave, is going to be doing a teaching series in the fall, and that's online and it's available to everybody. And he is a magnificent teacher. So look for that one. I'm sure alumni will get in touch with you with the ways to find this. The Library Indigenous Resources portal is a treasure chest. It's got books, it's got films, teaching tools, research guides, and then of course, there's a mile in their shoes. And this program, Moira, you're now the poster person for it. I think I sure want to take it. And thank you so much for your description and telling us how much it meant to you intellectually, but also spiritually and in your heart. Really, really appreciate that. And on behalf of everyone, I would like to thank the hardworking and far-seeing organizers of today's session. Again, I hope that this event has sparked some reflection and maybe inspired you to action. I always think a good place to start is with books. You know, they're really amazing, and you can carry them with you wherever you go. There are a lot of good ones out there. And again, thank you to Allison for starting us off. And I'm going to turn things over to our wonderful elder, Alan Dockstader, Tihois Quant. And I thank him, as always, for his patience and his leadership and following protocol. His words will be the last ones that we hear together in our time today. Thank you to you all.
There you go. I just want to say thank you to Sheila for being such a good person. Yeah, I'll be doing elder talks, and Monday is our we have summer elder talks also. So Monday this coming Monday we will be doing some talks on on some stuff that I think is important to us all. Ano, ang kwat ji, da kwat nung wela dung kalit te kanu hela dusla swagwe go unka na te you got drop drop lung oska ochi yo yo tung kayik winiot ni kwa we ne go kayik wenis la de donate. That was a short version.